Om Shano Mitra Sham Varunaha Shamno Bhavatrayama Shano Brihaspatihi Shano Vishnururu Kramaha Namo Brahmane Namaste Vayo Twameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi Twameva Pratyaksham Brahma Vadishyami Vratam Varishyami, Satyam Varishyami, Tanmam Avatu, Tadvaktaram Avatu, Avatu Mam, Avatu Vaktaram. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. May the day be auspicious to us. May the night be auspicious to us. May the sun be auspicious to us, and may the winds be auspicious to us. May strength be within us, and may the Lord of all heavens, the upholder of truth and righteousness, and be propitious to us. May Brahman protect us, and may Brahman protect our teachers. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. Good morning, everybody, at least good morning in Santa Barbara. It's kind of cool and cloudy here, thank God. Good evening or really early morning in India and everywhere else. Welcome. I thought it'd be a good time to talk about fearlessness since everything seems to be going to hell in a handbasket right now. What a better time to think about fearlessness. When I was 15, I started coming here to the Vedanta Society in Santa Barbara. And one Friday evening, I finagled my parents to drive me up for the Friday night class. And Swami Vandanananda, who was this wonderful, wonderful sadhu, a wonderful monk, very loving and kind, later became General Secretary of the Order, was giving a Friday night class on the Bhagavad Gita. And the class would go about 45 minutes. And then there'd be 15 minutes for questions and answers. And so you could either ask your question from the auditorium, or if you were a chicken like me, you would write them out on a piece of paper, and then the usher would come up and hand them to the Swami, and he would read it. So I was young and oversensitive, and I didn't want to embarrass myself by showing how little I knew. And so I wrote the question out, what is fear? And Swami Vandanananda was handed the question, and he read, what is fear? Here is someone who has no fear. Ha! And everyone just burst out into laughter. And I was mortified because I thought, now everybody knows who asked that stupid question. But for me, it wasn't a stupid question because I really did want to know more about fear. I think, after the laughter subsided, he gave some sort of answer about ego identification or something like that, but it didn't satisfy me, obviously, because 53 yeyears later, I remember like it was yesterday. So I wasn't happy with the answer because I really did want to know more about fear and what caused fear. Because I think a lot of the source of my fear at that point, I was aware of the fact that I was fearful at times. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that I was young, I was female, and I was small. And I had already, by the time I was 15, I'd already racked up some really unpleasant experiences as the result of the fact that I was young, female, and small. But I mean, there were some other fears too that were anxieties, you might say. It's like, what if I can't meet my academic expectations? What if I can't pass this class? What would happen if I gained 50 pounds? What if I never had any friends? Because I've just been middle-aged sophomore year, I transferred from Sacramento to Santa Barbara. It's like all the girls were mean to me. All the white girls, I should say, were mean to me. So I was like, what if I never have any friends? So, I was 15. This is what you expect for a 15-year-old. But I mean, some of my fears had a definite basis in fact. Definite reality was happening there. And I felt bad that that I didn't get a solid answer for my question. At least not the solid answer that I wanted. because I was aware of the fact too that I really wanted to feel fearless. I didn't want to feel hedged around with fear or anxiety or any sort of trepidation, not the feeling of always looking behind your back to see if someone was behind you. I was aware of that. So I think all of us, I thought it was an appropriate thing to even kind of remember, because all of us to some extent have to deal with fear or anxiety. Some people have it to an absolutely debilitating extent, and some people have it to a mild or a moderate degree. Some people have just enough to keep them out of trouble, and some people seem to invite trouble. It's like, hey, let's go ski off a mountaintop, or I know a place that has 80-foot waves. Let's go there. Some people seem to like want to push that envelope. And you know what? All of us feel fear. If we see a car headed towards us and they don't seem to see us, all of us are going, whoa, that's normal. All of us are going to feel like, our stomach clenching if we go to a doctor and he says, I'm sorry, I've got bad news for you. All of us are going to feel fear if we're in the coming on to a hurricane, or if we're in the path of a tornado, or if we feel the earth under our feet shaking, rocking, and rolling, and you'll hear that terrible tearing sound of the earth, and then you think, oh, this is it. God, I wish I had better clothes to wear for my last minute on earth. But, this is what comes to your mind at these things. Anyone feels fear under these conditions. But it seems to me that right now, a lot of people are really suffering a lot of fear. And I think a lot of it is the fear of the unknown, because like the COVID virus, it's like a lot of it is fear of the unknown, the fear of the unseen. We can't see it. We can't see this virus, but we know that it takes a toll. Nobody wants to be sick, and nobody wants to be like really sick. No one wants their loved ones to be sick. No one's like eager to die in the hospital. No one wants to be able to be surrounded by their loved ones. Nobody wants to be, in your last moments, to be taking care of doctors who look like astronauts and are, looking at you with a mixture of fear and compassion in their faces. And no one wants their loved ones to be in that position either. On the other hand, no one wants to develop Alzheimer's. No one wants to get Parkinson's, and no one wants to end up an invalid for any reason. And that's just the physical body. We also have a lot of other fears. We have economic fears. What if after this pandemic goes over, my job doesn't come back? What if I run out of, what if I can't get a job at all? What happens if I run out of money? What happens if I run out of money what if I run out of all my retirement money? I mean, these are very common fears right now. There's also political fears that are pretty overwhelming for a lot of people. What if this person wins? What if that person wins? It's like, not in our hands, except for voting. We also have environmental fears that are quite real and justified. I mean, the California is on fire. We have the hurricanes. We just had some major ones in Louisiana hitting Texas. We've got tornadoes everywhere. We've got the Arctic on fire. The Arctic not only melting, but on fire. I mean, these are all really justified fears. So what do we do with all this? How do we deal with the fact that there is some fear that we can neither process nor even digest? There's a story from the Mahabharata that I think is really apt right now. Krishna and Balarama go out into the forest, and they go deeper and deeper into the forest when suddenly night falls. And this happens in India. It's like someone throws a switch and it's like, it's night. It's like, okay, well, we're not going anywhere. We're going to spend the night in the forest. So they did. And they made a decision. Okay, so now, I'll stay watch. We're just going to take turns. One person stays watch and the other person sleeps. So Balaram was standing watch and Krishna was asleep. So Balaram is standing and keeping watch, and all of a sudden this huge monster appears before him and says, "How dare you trespass in my forest?" And he was huge and ugly and mean and terrifying. And Balaram was just shaking and fierce. Where'd he come from? Monster disappeared. And then he went away. It's like, okay. He came back again a second time. He was bigger, said, "How dare you trespass in my forest?" Balaram was just shaking and quivering in fear. It's like the monster seems to be getting bigger. And then he disappears, and Balaram's like shaking and trembling. And third time, the monster appears, even bigger and screaming in rage. "How dare you trespass in my forest?" Balaram passes out unconscious out of sheer fear, calls out Krishna, falls unconscious out of sheer fear. Oh, Krishna, wakes up and sees Balaram lying there. He says, "Oh, poor Balaram. He's so tired. He fell asleep." So Krishna says, "Let Balaram rest. I'll stand watch now." So Krishna is standing watch, and all of a sudden this monster appears before him and says, "How dare you trespass in my forest?" And Krishna says, "What do you want?" The monster disappears. And Krishna's keeping watch. The monster comes back, bigger, says, "How dare you trespass in my forest?" And Krishna says, he looks at him completely unperturbed. Monster seems to be getting a little bit smaller, and he disappears. Third time, the monster appears. "How dare you trespass in my forest?" Krishna looks at him. He's completely unperturbed. Blood pressure, pulse, everything's exactly the same. Not a ripple in his mind. He just looks at him, completely calm. And the monster gets smaller and smaller and smaller until finally he's a itsy bitsy little monster, and he picks him up and just puts him in his pocket. Next morning, Balaram wakes up and he goes, "Krishna, there was this monster that was in," and then Krishna says, "Oh, He pulls this little monster up. "This one?" And Balaram's going, what? And Krishna explained to him that he had faced what could be a very fearful situation with patience and with self-control. He never allowed his mind to get ahead of him. He always kept an unperturbed mind, and he would not allow his composure to be disturbed. So what could have been absolutely terrifying was turned into something negligible, teeny tiny, itsy bitsy, something you just throw right in your little pocket and no one's even going to notice it. The monster was tamed and under his control. I think the point of the story is obvious. When we give way to fear, the monsters of our own minds take control over us. And then we're really in danger of losing ourselves. We lose who we really are. We don't ever want to lose ourselves. Just as Lord Buddha says in the Dhammapada, the worst enemy cannot harm you as much as your own thoughts. And I think that's something we all should keep in mind. Our own thoughts can do us way more damage than anyone or anything out there. Krishna tells us in chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita, and if you've ever spent any time with Swami Sheshananda, you have this verse memorized. I see Devi Prana here because he made us memorize this. And he wrote it out for us. He tore little pieces of paper up, handed it to us, and said, memorize this, memorize this. So we definitely did. Udaretatmanapanam natmanam avasavayet atmaiva hyatmana bandhur atmaiva ripur atmanaha. An often given translation is one must raise the self by the self, which I think can be confusing. What's the self? So we have to lift the lower part of our mind by the higher part of our mind. We have to lift the unenlightened, the unawakened part of our mind by the awakened part of our mind. And we can never weaken the mind, for the enlightened part of our mind is our only friend, and the lower part of our mind, the unenlightened part, is really our only enemy. Ripur Atma. Okay, well, that's all very well and good. If we see a car careening towards us, our heart's going to race. We're going to get out of the way. We're going to run. It's like, and that's normal. That's a normal human response. Don't ever feel ashamed of running out of the way of a car out of control. But when fear preys on our mind and takes control over us and makes us forget who we are, then we need to take steps to overcome what has become a huge obstacle in our life, because it's running our life. We no longer have control over ourselves. Our fear does. Swami Adbhutananda Latu Maharaj said, as long as you have a body, and I think all of us here, I'm looking at it, we all have bodies, so we're all in that club of the body. As long as you have a body, you must experience disease, sorrow, fear, pain, and suffering. Anyone who wants to escape from all these, okay, sign me up, will have to hold on to God. His bliss will remove all suffering. See, as long as we have a body, we're going to experience all these things. Why? It's so unfair. Why does God give us pain and suffering and all that? It's not God who's like shooting down arrows at us. These are the effects of our own thoughts and actions from this and previous lives. Karma phala, the effects of our own thoughts and actions. No one out there is doing it to us. We're not poor little victims. No, our own thoughts and actions will take their effect as either good, either pleasant or unpleasant effects in our lives, either physically or mentally. We never complain about the good things that happen. That seems like natural. That's what should happen all the time. We also have the things from our own previous thoughts and actions that were negative, that were pain-bearing, that we will suffer. So what do we do when we don't want to suffer? Hold on to God. So we all have this body to deal with its ups and its downs and its in-betweens. So we just need to hold on to the divine and practice little titiksha, forbearance. And just remember, this too shall pass. Everything else does. This too shall pass. Everything shall pass. We suffer more when we worry about it, when we obsess about it. So what we have to do is just put our minds somewhere else. Absolutely put our minds somewhere else that will lessen our identification. Because the more we identify with the pain, the more we identify with the fear, the more suffering we give ourselves. The Buddha has a wonderful parable about this. The Buddha once asked a student, if a person is struck by an arrow, is it painful? And the student said, it is. And the Buddha said, if the person is struck by a second arrow, is it even more painful? And the student replied, it is. And the Buddha said, in life, we do not always have control over that first arrow. But with the second arrow comes the possibility of choice. That's the important part. Or as they say in Alcoholics Anonymous, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. We all have to suffer the effects of our own thoughts and actions of this and previous lives. Comes in the package of having a body and mind. But the suffering, that second arrow, is choice. We can either shove it under our skin and make ourselves suffer more, or we can choose not to go there. The effects of our own karma is the first arrow. The effect of our anxiety, our worry, our fear is that second arrow that we decide to impale ourselves with. Swami Shivananda was a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, a wonderful, wonderful soul. He was president of our order and general secretary for many, many years. And he suffered from debilitating asthma. And his latter year and a half had a debilitating stroke, which paralyzed the right-hand side of his body. And he'd be up at night with this pillow on his chest, trying to breathe, because he couldn't even sleep lying down, because the asthma was so bad. And people would say, oh, Maharaj, how are you? And he said, how? Oh, I am fine. I'm fine. I'm absorbed in bliss. They said, Maharaj, look at your body. He said, oh, this. Oh yes, it is falling apart. You're talking about the body? Oh yes, it is falling apart. But I'm in bliss. No identification with it. And okay, so we're all going to say, well, that's different. He was a disciple of Ramakrishna. He was an enlightened soul. We're not in that club. Yeah, well, you know what? We all need role models in life. We all need ideals to work toward. So we can't say, oh, no. We're not in that club. We'll say, I want to be I know I'm in this club now, but I don't want to be there forever. I want to be in that club. I want to kind of, do a little, social scale rising here. I want to go to a more enlightened group of people where I don't have to suffer so much. So we should keep in mind for like role models, these direct disciples who all had bodies and minds, and they all had to deal with suffering too. Apart from Sri Ramakrishna, had cancer, and Sarda Devi, who, my God, had the relatives from hell, how much they made her suffer, and how much physical suffering she had to undergo. They underwent it. Not only that, they took it on from their own disciples, suffering more so that others wouldn't have to suffer so much. So all these disciples, oh my God, what they went through. They had strokes, they had diabetes, they had gangrene. What to speak of Swami Trigunatitananda up in San Francisco, who came to this country, and in 1915, one of the students at the San Francisco temple was obviously crazy, paranoid, schizophrenic, threw a bomb at Swami Trigunatita where he was giving a lecture. And the bomb instantly killed the mentally ill man and totally blew up the area where Swami Trigunatitananda was. And the first thing Swami Trigunatitananda said when people came to him to see if he was still alive, so he said, what happened? Who was it? And they said gave the name of the man. He said, what happened to him? Is he all right? He said, no, he was killed. And he said, oh, the poor man. His heart was melted in compassion for the person who threw the bomb at him. It took 3 days for Swami Trigunatitananda to die. And it was extraordinarily painful. And the nurse who tended on him said, I have never seen such a calm, uncomplaining, and enduring patient in my entire life. He chose not to go there. He held on to the divine. Bearing pain and fear and any kind of suffering we have with as much detachment as we can muster is what's really going to help us deal with fear. And a lot of the fear of what we have is like we fear about, what may come after this? Not only what I fear, what I know, but what later? What later? This might lead to that. That might lead to that. That's that second arrow that we're impaling ourselves with. The fear is that monster that we want to keep in our pocket rather than having us being knocked unconscious. We don't want to be knocked unconscious by whatever life gives us. You know what? We know we all got a body. It comes with this package. You got a body, we're going to experience disease, grief, debilitation, old age, death. Comes with a package. That's it. That's the package. We're not exempt from the laws of nature. Just because we come to Vedanta doesn't mean like we get a pass on it. We sometimes run into people who are longtime devotees who think that somehow they ought to be given a pass. If they're a devotee, they shouldn't have to suffer any of this. I have a devotee who was loudly complaining, how could Sri Ramakrishna do this? How could he do this? She was ill and had some family tragedies. It's like, yes, I'm so sorry. And she said, how could the Lord do this to us? It's like, well, Sri Ramakrishna himself had cancer. What the Holy Mother had to deal with? And she said, yes, but how could he do it to us? It's like, I said, well, and I said, well, the direct disciples suffered so much, but how could the Lord do it to us? I said, even the nuns suffer so much. Look, one of our nuns has advanced Alzheimer's, another has a debilitating disease. She said, yes, but why? I said, the Lord is not a slot machine. You can't just stick your little jopam and prayer and meditation in the slot and bingo, ka-ching. scot-free, home, you get a pass. Being a devotee means the effects of our own karma is mitigated. Holy Mother said, if our karma says that we're supposed to have an arm taken off, instead we suffer a scratch. It means more than anything else, we don't have to throw that second arrow down our throat or into our chest. It gives us the patience and the endurance and the faith to be able to go through whatever life gives us. That's what being a devotee means. Not getting a pass. It means being able to endure whatever life brings us. It means that when the effects of our own thoughts and actions come to us, that we're able to bear it. And we can try to avoid that second arrow. Being a devotee means having the strength to bear what comes. And the more time that we spend in our sadhana, the more the time that we spend in our meditation, in our japa, in our holy reading, in our remembrance of God, in our singing songs to the Lord, in our kirtan, in our bhajans, in all our spiritual practices, the more time we spend, the more faith we develop. The more faith we develop, the more we can experience the presence of the divine in our own lives. And we can see the effect of the divine actively engaging in our own lives. And that very tangible presence gets us through the most painful and difficult and fearful times, that very tangible presence in our lives that's there and available for us all the time, 100% of the time, without fail. Being a devotee also gives us what we don't even want to hear about. Being a devotee gives us what we call the R word, the least popular word in the Vedanta lexicon, the word that nobody wants to hear: renunciation. Don't talk to me about renunciation. Why should I renounce? It's all the play of the Divine Mother. Absolutely right. So people will say, well, can't I just enjoy the world and there's all this beautiful play, the Leela of the Divine Mother? Sure, absolutely. You just may not like her play. You may like her play when she's doing a nice, pretty waltz. You might not like her play when she's stomping on your back with her cleats on your back. You might not like that part of the play. Swami Shivananda said, this is all the Leela, the play of God. In one form, he's bringing pain to so many people. He persecutes them with famine, with sickness, and with grief. In another form, again, it is God alone who is inspiring, who is serving people and inspiring people to remove the distress in humanity. Both sides. So if you want to enjoy the Leela, the play of God, go for it. But you don't get just one side, you get both sides of that picture. That's why we get the R word, the least popular word, renunciation. Renunciation doesn't mean living in a cave. That's why the renunciation is important, because it kind of gives us a grip of what we have to deal with in life. That's why the great poet, sage, Sanskritist Bhartrahari wrote 100 verses on the R word, the Vairagya Shatakam. He wrote, in enjoyment, when we enjoy, we have the fear of disease. When we have honor, we have the fear of losing it. When we are strong, we have the fear of enemies who are even stronger. When we have beauty, we have the fear of old age. If we're virtuous, we have the fear of scandal. If we have scholarship and erudition, we're afraid of another scholar who has even more scholarship and erudition. If we have a body, we have the fear of death. He said, in this life, everything is fraught with fear. And he said, renunciation alone is fearless. He wrote this probably somewhere 600, 700 years, 600, 700, the Common Era. All these things that we see are so modern, been there for eternity. So the R word, renunciation, doesn't mean going off to join an ashrama. It doesn't mean joining a monastery or a convent or finding that just absolutely perfect cave in the Himalayas with the beautiful vistas and the, the pools and the heat and the AC. Nor does it mean quitting your job so you can spend all your time in meditation. It just means trying to lose this identification with this body-mind complex and this identification of I and mine. Losing this identification with I and mine, and this is mine. This is me. Because all of it is changing and it's all going to go, because this too shall pass. All of it's going to pass, including the bodies and minds of us and all of those that we love. It's changing all the time. And this body shall pass, and the body shall pass of every single person that we love and depend on. And we have to remember that. And this is actually how Swami Advaitananda came to Sri Ramakrishna. Swami Advaitananda, known as the Elder Gopal, we meet in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. And he was 55 years old when he came to Sri Ramakrishna. So we can't use the excuse as, oh, well, he was thinking of God since he was like a toddler. No, he came to Sri Ramakrishna when he was well after the bloom of youth, well after middle age. In India, in those days, 55, you were considered elderly. 55 meant like old man, Buddha Gopal, Elder Gopal. So he came to Sri Ramakrishna because he was so distraught and grief-struck by the death of his wife that a friend took him to meet Sri Ramakrishna. And he met him, and he was so impressed, he came back a second time and the third time. By the third time, he decided, I'm just going to stay here. He gave up everything to stay and live with Sri Ramakrishna. And the Elder Gopal was the only male, apart from Lati Maharaj, that could speak directly to Holy Mother Sri Sardadevi. Everybody else had to have an intermediary, except for these two, because they were so pure. During Sri Ramakrishna's last illness, the Elder Gopal was with him constantly and took beautiful, unmitigated care of him, never left his side. So after Sri Ramakrishna's death, he joined the monastery. When they all took their final vows, Swami Vivekananda gave him the name Swami Advaitananda, one whose bliss is in the non-duality of Brahman. Swami Advaitananda said the most wonderful thing. He said, Thakur, that's referring to Sri Ramakrishna, the master. Thakur has shown me that it is he who is manifested in all, in everything. After he had had that experience, he couldn't criticize anyone. He couldn't see fault in anyone or anything, because he saw Sri Ramakrishna in absolutely everything. So here's a person who put his all into his spiritual life at the age of 55. I think we can identify with that. He wasn't this young kid. He came upon it late in life, but he gave it his all. And he poured his whole heart and soul into it. And he saw that with the grace of Sri Ramakrishna, he saw that through his grace, Sri Ramakrishna was manifested in everything. And this is verified in the Chandi, the Devi Mahatmyam, this great hymn to the Divine Mother, in which she says, I am all alone in the world here. Who else is there here besides me? All this that we experience is nothing but the Divine Mother. And again, this brings us right back to fearlessness. Who else is there besides me? It's all the Divine Mother. Now, this unitary experience is again what we hear of in the Pravrajika Vrajaprana, where that verse famously says, there is fear from the second. As long as one hears another, sees another, smells another, is aware of another, there is fear. But when we realize there's nothing but oneness, there is no fear. So we can try to remember this. When we're feeling that sense of anxiety kind of creeping up in the mind, who else is there here besides me? or Sri Krishna being manifest in absolutely everything, or in the Pravrajika Upanishad, there is only fear in the second. Or as Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, I am the beginning, the middle, and the end of everything. There's nothing but the Lord in absolutely everything. Fear often comes to us when we have that feeling that we're kind of losing our footing in the world. That's like, we just put our foot on a rock, but now the rock is giving out from under us. Like, oh, I thought you were a steady rock. I thought you were there. So we all have this sense of stability, this all sense of permanency, that the things that we see around us are there. And when they're not there, or when they seem to be a little shaky, then we feel like, wait a minute. How could the Arctic be burning? How could this person just have died? I just talked to them. How could this have happened? But then we get this pandemic. It's like, huh? What do you mean there's a pandemic? You mean I could die? Yeah, there's a real possibility that you will die either today, tomorrow, next month, next year, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. Absolute certainty, 100% certainty, this body is going to go. And the pandemic really brings it home to us like, oh God, that means I could die. Yeah, guess what? A plane could fall on you too tomorrow. But get used to the fact that this is a temporary arrangement. This is very temporary. It's like student housing. It's very temporary. It's like being in a dorm. Things are always temporary. Things are always changing, but we refuse to acknowledge it because we don't like it. We like the idea that it's all stable and permanent, but that's not the nature of the world. It's always changing. The name for the world itself is always changing, always changing, always changing. That's why it's the world. We see people, we go to like a college reunion after 40, 50 years, and we look at people and say, God, they've gotten so old. It doesn't occur to us that they're thinking, oh my God, is that person? Jeez, I didn't even recognize him. God, they're so old, they're so gray, they're so fat. Yeah, really? Sri Krishna used to say, mudfish type of fish in India, they go deep into the mud, but the fishermen they're really smart there. So they put the net at the bottom, and the mud settles there, and then the mudfish go in and they settle on top of the mud. And that mudfish thinks, according to Sri Krishna, that it's really safe down here, right down there in the mud. And then the fisherman just pulls them up. It's like, you know what? We're going to get pulled up. We're going to get pulled up. Don't be surprised when the net moves, because that comes with having a body. The net is temporary. This is temporary. We're going to get pulled up. Don't be surprised by it. Prepare for it. Remember that all this shall pass away. And as the disciples tell us, hold on to the Lord. Hold on to the Lord. Everything we owned, everything we loved, everything we thought was ours is absolutely going to pass away. And then we make peace with this knowledge. It's like, then it's such a relief. It's like, you know what? None of it's my responsibility. None of it's mine. None of it's anything. It's just temporary arrangement. We do as best as we can with this temporary arrangement, knowing like the Lord is in control. He's the beginning, middle, and end of everything. We do our little part as best we can and know that it's a temporary situation. Then when we keep this knowledge right here in our pocket, the fear kind of dissipates. When I was thinking a few weeks ago about the topic of fearlessness, this verse from the Gita just kept popping into my head because Swami Asheshananda, in his more martial attitude, said to me, study the Gita. No, memorize the Gita. Memorize the Gita. I was like, oh, no. So one of the things that kind of stuck in my head was, Neha vikramana shosti pratyavayo navidite Svapamastyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bayat. It was that mahato bayat that stuck in my head. In this yoga, in this spiritual practice, there is no loss of effort, nor any harm can be done. Even a little bit of this knowledge protects us from the great fear. Even a little bit of this spiritual knowledge protects us from the great Mahatobhaya, the great fear. What's the great fear? Well, obviously death, but with death comes the other part of the equation, rebirth. Because it isn't just the quietness of death. If we die unenlightened, if we die without knowing who we really are, if we die in spiritual ignorance, it means reborn. Here comes samsara. Here it comes all over again. The package that comes with having a body and mind. The samsara parade. It means Groundhog Day. Over and over again, experiencing the effects of our karmas, going, if we're unenlightened, having to go through it all over again, accruing more karma, more effects of our karma, Groundhog Day. That is the Mahatobhaya. But even a little bit of this knowledge removes that fear. That's such a great quotation, even a little bit, because they say other things, there's no harm in this. Why does he say that? Because in our other efforts in the world, let's say we do a house, we're out there, we're going to build a house. And about halfway through, we go, yeah, I don't want to do that. I've run out of money. So the rats move in and it gets dry rot and we get mold. And then all the copper wiring is stolen. And so harm is done. We have to pay to have it demolished. Okay, we decide to bake a cake. About halfway through, we put it in the oven and say, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to wait. We take it out of the oven. So we neither have the ingredients of the dough, because we can't just eat the dough, because it's just a muck. And we don't have an edible cake. And we've lost the money that we spent on the ingredients. Spiritual life, even even a little bit, even a little bit, works in our favor. It's like, you know what? Even a little bit of that removes the great fear. So we want to get the interest and our investment. We put this investment forward, we're getting the interest because it removes that fear. That's the point of spiritual life. We pay it forward. We just keep putting in our time. So before he says this verse, Krishna has been telling us, know the Atman, unborn, undying, never ceasing, never beginning, birthless, deathless, unchanging forever. How can it die the death of the body? Bodies are said to die, but that which possesses the body, the Atman, is eternal. So when we feel that little hint of fear moving in, we can remember Vrajaprana at the end of her life, she put these words to music and she sang it continually. And when she was in the hospital, the doctors, the nurses were in tears listening to her sing this beautiful song. Know the self, unborn, undying. That's who we are. That's our real nature. It's not the body that's going to be affected by the fires or the hurricanes or the floods or COVID. This is the part that's unborn and undying, birthless, deathless, unchanging forever. So Swami Vivekananda was the king of fearlessness, and Sri Ramakrishna loved him for his absolute fearlessness. He said, be not afraid of anything. It is fear that is the cause of all the misery in the world. It is fear that is the greatest of all superstitions. After all, what are we afraid of? To die? You think you're a body? Superstition. He said, it is fear that is the cause of all of our woes. And it is fearlessness that brings heaven in a moment. He said, therefore, arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. So when we begin to fear this little clutching anxiety, strike back and say, no, who am I to fear? The Divine Mother is my mother. You're not going to mess with the Divine Mother. She's my mother. I refuse to go there. Do you know whose mother? Do you know whose child I am? I'm the child of my mother. Or we can think I'm eternal, unborn, undying. What? You can't affect me. Nothing affects me. Or we can, when we just start feeling, I'm not okay about this, we can say, I'm not going to go there. We're going to think of the Lord and remember that Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, are always there for us. Think of the Guru and the grace that we've received in this tradition, and that we're being always protected, that we're in the arms of the Divine Mother. When a baby's in the arms of the Divine Mother, the baby doesn't say, oh my God, what if my mother drops me? What if she trips on something? What if she forgets she's holding it? Baby never thinks that. Baby just thinks, mother, mother, mother. And that's all we have to think too. No baby ever's ever going to think, Mom, oh my, drop me. So the first arrow we have no control over. That's what life brings us. That's what our own karma brings us. That's what we have to deal with in our life. It's okay. We learn from those first arrows. Second arrow, we have control over. And that's what we've got to remember. We don't need to give away what rightfully belongs to us. And that is our own divine nature, which is freedom, which is joy, which is absolute purity, absolute beginningless, endless joy. That's who we are. We don't sell that down the river. We don't give it away. No reason to give our own selves away. It's not necessary. We don't put that second arrow. In the end, we just have to remember the words of Sri Devi, Holy Mother. Never fear whenever you are in distress. Just say to yourself, I have a mother. Thank you. Please join me in the chant. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. And if there are any questions or problems or accusations, I'll be happy to deal with it. Trivialities? Opportunities? Great to see.
Hello, Mataji. I am Sai from India.
Welcome.
Pranams, Mataji. Mataji, I wanted to ask two questions actually.
Yes.
You told us to travel to the club where the direct disciples are.
Yes.
When I listen to the lectures or read the books relating to them, of course, a part of me feels inspired, but at the same time, the other part of me feels pretty confident that I'm not going to become them or anywhere close to them, at least in this lifetime.
We're asking, for those who can't hear the question, about how we travel to the club of the direct disciples, where we can acquire some of their tendencies, because the natural tendency is like, I can never be like that. So how do we move to that club? Well, we can never be an Ishvara Koti. We can never be an ever perfect soul, but we can try to emulate some of their characteristics and make a conscious effort. Swami Triyananda, one of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, considered the embodiment of Vedanta, would say, okay, I'm trying to think of the exact wording. Oh, David, trying to remember, but it's basically you practice what you want to be. David Prana, what's the exact wording on that? Do you remember that, Pavitra? We just had it the other day. In other words, you pretend to be what you know you really are. In other words, we really are the fearless divine self. That's who we are. We don't feel like it. So if necessary, practice acting that way, because that's who we really are. It's a delusion and a falsehood to pretend that we're anything but this eternal divine Atman. So, oh, Dave Prana had to go because it's lunchtime, I think, at the place. But basically, it's try to practice what is true. So even though we feel like we're immortal, because our body tells us that the body is immortal, we try to act in a way, how does an enlightened person act? Well, we try to act as close to that as we can emulate. And of course, we'll forget 5 billion times a day. But then if we remember once, that once is a success. Svalbombi, even a little of that removes the great fear. Even a little bit of this practice removes the great fear. So the more that we can practice just incrementally, it doesn't have to be like going from 100 to from 0 to 100 by pressing down the accelerator. We practice, we try to add on, we see, oh yeah, I really blew it that way. Okay, tomorrow I'll try to do better. Try to do better by this afternoon. I'll try to do better and see if I can keep a little more control over myself, and definitely in one's prayers say, you know, Lord, can you really help me become less of a jerk? Can you please make me less arrogant, less egotistic? Can you please, I know I've got this ego. Can you please help me being able to recognize when it's getting out of my control? I think prayer is a very powerful tool that sometimes we think in Vedanta that, oh, well, we meditate and we do japa. Well, prayer is a very, very powerful spiritual prayer practice that is very important and helpful to us, because with prayer, we really utilize the power of the will. We often kind of let our will go when we're meditating, because pretty often the mind goes, woof, and all of a sudden we've gone somewhere else. But prayer brings our power of will in. We're directed for this like laser beam of, Lord, Mother, you know what just happened. I didn't like it, and you probably didn't either, but help me do better. I think the power of prayer can really help us greatly in our spiritual practice. That's a great question. Thank you for being with us from India. I see a couple of questions.
I have one more question to add.
Yes.
Mataji, sorry, Mataji. Does the feeling of guilt have any positive role to play in our life, whether it is spiritual or material?
No, the feeling of guilt is one of the most harmful things one could ever have. When you see guilt arising in your mind, stomp on it. Break it to pieces, burn it with your flamethrower. Swami Prabhavananda said when he came to this country, his greatest problem was dealing with people's problems of guilt. It is extremely harmful, because what it does is it's a reverse form of egotism. It's like, I am so lousy. I should have done that. Why did I do that? Aren't I horrible? And in fact, it creates a warped ego. And we need a healthy ego in order to control it. If we have a really sick, devious ego, then it goes in really twisted, sick ways. We need to remember, okay, yeah, I blew it. I really wish I hadn't done that. I feel terrible about it. Okay, Lord, I will try to do it again. Sri Ramakrishna again and again said, those people who harp on sin, those who think they're sinners verily become sinners. Papi. Then you think the more you think about sin, the more sinful you become. The more you feel guilty about something, the more you're likely to do it again. Because what it does is this little impression, some scar that we've made in our mind, by going over it with guilt, we've just made it a little bit deeper. And then we feel guilty about it again. It gets deeper. So we're all the more inclined to do it all over again and feel even more guilty. So we do it again because we made that samskara deeper. We put that rut in our mind and we made it deeper. So Sri Krishna said, pray to the Lord, please, I will never do it again. And maybe we will, maybe we won't, but we can try with all our might, because if we go to the Lord with prayer, with all of our minds saying, I will not do that again. Please give me the strength not to do that again. Then we're much more inclined not to do it and to remember our sort of the better part of ourselves. Because remember that line from the Bhagavad Gita says, do never weaken the mind. The feeling of guilt weakens the mind. We need to have a strong instrument, and the mind is the only instrument we have in our spiritual life. It is our one and only tool. We want to keep that one and only tool in very strong, healthy condition so we can subdue it. If you have a horse that you're riding on, you want that horse to be strong and healthy. You don't want a weak, sick, weird, paranoid, deviant horse. You want a horse that you can tame. You want You want a good something under your control. That's a really good question. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Mataji.
Cody.
Hello?
Hello. Hi, Cody.
Can I talk? Have you got me?
Yes.
No? Oh, good. Thank you, by the way. You really are amazing, and you're a real blessing to all of us. I thank you. We thank you very, very much. A quick insight, as you were talking, this idea of fearlessness is something that I think has haunted all of us, wanting to be fearless. This is a crazy thing, but the identity with Brahman to me is probably the best way for me, realizing that I am Brahman, is the greatest bringer of freedom from fear. And this is going to sound crazy, but I was pumping gas in Rochester on a rainy day, and I looked up and I saw this dove on the top of a house, probably 100 yards away. And I felt this profound sense of identity. I couldn't get over it. And I'm a retired Anglican priest, and I actually mentioned it in a sermon. I'm sure some people raised their eyebrows and thought, what the heck is he talking about? But anyway, it's that type of sense of identity with the others, with the sentient beings around us who are fundamentally Brahman. And I wondered if you...
Very, very good point. He's bringing up this topic about fearlessness, because not everyone here can hear you, about how this identity with Brahman is his greatest tool to feel fearless, to remember that we're all Brahman. And then he was saying that he could see a pigeon on top of a lamp, a light pole, and he felt a profound oneness with that being. And I think that's very true, because if we feel like this body will die, well, we can see that all the other bodies. And when Sri Ramakrishna was asked, please pray that your body will live. So he went to Mother Kali and said, Ma, these people are asking that this pillowcase, this container that I'm wearing should live longer. And Mother Kali looked at him and said, aren't you living through all these? Aren't you eating through all these other mouths? And he said he was so ashamed, because yes, indeed he was. So that does give that feeling of fearlessness. However, as people are very identified with their body, it's very hard for people to go there. But I think sometimes we could even try to go there. And remember, yes, I remember Swami Lokeshwarana, who was at the Institute of Culture in Kolkata for many years, said that once he was outside and he realized he saw the moon and the stars. And he said he loved looking at the stars because he realized the same reality which were in the stars was the same reality which shone in his own heart. And that same reality was in the hearts of every other being that he was in contact with. And it gave him that tremendous feeling of bliss to realize that we're all connected in and through this divinity. So when we look at the stars at night, we can say, that which shines within you shines within me too. That wonderful feeling of expansiveness that I think is what you were referring to.
Do you have any poetry or maybe even a book that you'd recommend?
Well, I really like the Ashtavakra Samhita, that's Ashtavakra Samhita, the Song of the Free, which is really quite beautiful. And there's a wonderful translation by Byrom, B-Y-R-O-M, published by Shambhala. You're lucky you got the bookseller here who knows the books.
And it's called the Song of the Free, you say?
Yeah, the Ashtavakra, or it's also called the Ashtavakra Gita.
Thank you.
Yeah, the one, look under the name Byrom, B-Y-R-O-M, Thomas.
I think it's B-Y-R-O-N.
M. Says the bookseller has been selling it for 15, 20 years.
Thank you.
It's called The Heart of Awareness.
Heart of Awareness. Thank you, Amrita. Yeah, Heart of Awareness, Byrom. It's quite lovely. It's quite lovely. It gives you that expansiveness. And I think now, because it's after 12, I better close it for right now. But I want to thank you all for joining us. Please, everyone, stay happy and healthy and strong. And thank you for joining us in our community. Loving prayers for you all, Jama.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jama.
Thank you.